Hello. So something that I would like to talk about that I just made a 30+ minute recording of that should have been longer because it lost my train of thought multiple times, but that doesn't matter right now, is the fact that Valve is going kind of downhill. I say Valve is going downhill and I feel like people are going to see that title and think that it's going to be a video essay or something, but this is more or less just my current thoughts on it. I haven't even written down a script. This is just what I feel like is currently happening, and obviously, you know, downhill. It's more of a trending downward type deal. I feel like we're hitting a bit of a bump in Valve's current life cycle right now. You know, kind of the live long enough to see yourself become the villain. Although Valve, I wouldn't really consider them a villain or anything, but we're definitely seeing a bit of a trend downward from their upward slope that we've had over the last, 10, 20 plus years now. And the reason why I want to say that has to do with Counter-Strike 2. Now, Counter-Strike 2 recently had tournaments for, they had open qualifier tournaments for their whatever tournaments were going on. I forget what it was. But basically, for the recent Counter-Strike 2 tournaments, they had open qualifiers, which basically means anybody can join. Anybody, a silver one to a global elite to an actual pro player. You could have a team full of silver ones that just downloaded the game playing against a team full of professional players. And obviously the professional players would win, whatever, how it goes. But because Counter-Strike 2's anti-cheat is so bad, or VAC is so not bad, but so surface level and so hard to detect cheats instantly to an extent, we've seen a lot of cheaters in these open qualifiers. And the reason why I want this video is because I recently saw that an actual organization has pulled their Counter-Strike team completely due to that team losing in an open qualifier. I don't know if the team lost, but basically it was due to the fact of why would you have your professional level competitive team join an open qualifier just to not even make it past the first round because they lost to a group of cheaters. And it's not even like they're closet cheating and it's like we think they're cheating. It is like blatant type cheating. Like, I just installed the game, I've never played Counter-Strike before, so I'm going to install cheats type deal. Very blatant stuff. We've actually seen that Sparkles has made multiple videos talking about the cheating in Counter-Strike and how rampant it is right now. Really, it's not just that. It also has to do with the fact that Counter-Strike 2's launch was extremely rough considering a Valve game. And I know people, will make the comparison. Every time something like this happens where a good game has a sequel or has a new version of a game come out, i.e. Payday 3 or whatever, and people will compare that game. It's like, oh, well, Payday 2 was rough on launch too. It didn't have as much content. Or Counter-Strike, Global Offensive on its launch was rough. But again, the difference is that was the first time they had done that. And also Counter-Strike had multiple games before. But in the situation of Payday 2 was, well, Payday 2, it had released 10, almost 10 plus years ago, whereas Payday 3 has 10 years of experience to build off of what Payday 2 had already done. And obviously this doesn't really have to do with Payday, but I'm just using that as an example. Sorry, Payday, Payday Crew and all of that, but like Payday 3 really is a huge fucking letdown. It's depressing how awful that game is. And I say that because I really wanted to enjoy that game and play it, but here we are. Even same thing with Counter-Strike 2. Obviously, I'm not really playing Counter-Strike 2 as of recently. I played it when it released, and I just got bored of it. Not that the game was bad or anything, although I did have my issues with it, feeling like shots weren't registering or hitting when they should be, and this and that. And obviously, Valve and a bunch of people were like, oh, it's because of the animations are off, or it's because of subtick not lining up, or this or that. And I don't care whether it's this or that. I just want whatever the it is to be fixed. And multiple pro players and other people had that same sentiment. I mean, I think Simple even made a tweet saying that the game was, just felt rough. Felt like his shots weren't hitting and all of that. So when you have arguably one of the best Counter-Strike players coming out and saying that the game doesn't feel right, you have problems. I don't know what the problem is, and I simply don't care what it is. I simply don't care if it's a simple animation fix. I don't know what it is. I just want it fixed. And they had a couple of small updates, and it felt like it was, to an extent, fixed. After one of the animation fix updates, I had logged on to the game and tried playing it, and I felt like my shots were feeling a bit better. It felt like they had changed some stuff, but it didn't feel as perfect as, Global Offensive once was. And obviously, you can reminisce about older games, and obviously, I love, Global Offensive, and I grew up with it. It might just be, the rose-tinted glasses. You just miss what you had. But in reality, I'm really hyped for Counter-Strike 2, and if anything, I was expecting it to be a million times better than Global Offensive. Obviously, Obviously, I wasn't expecting it to be as perfect and whatnot, but when you advertise the sub-tick system as being the end-all of, be-all, end-all type deal, better than 128 tick.
So the server will know the exact moment you fired your shot, jumped your jump, or peaked your peak. And the server will calculate your precise actions between ticks. So what you see is what you get.
Yet you release it and you have all of these problems and complaints with it, then it probably isn't the end-all be-all, or if it is, you have some huge kinks to work out. And again, I don't care if it's a flawless perfect system on LAN because there's no ping and whatnot. You have to realize that this is an online game, and 99.9% of the player base will be playing this game online where ping is involved. So if sub-tick is so perfect that having even a slight ping difference will change the outcome of matches or change how a shot lands or how it registers with a server, you probably should f***ing change the system. But minus that, and I probably shouldn't have cursed there was no reason to, but minus that, getting off topic a little, getting a little too upset about stupid things that I just don't really care about that much. I mean, I barely played CS2 currently as is, plus there's not really a whole lot of content. On top of that, Counter-Strike 2 released with, well, nothing. We released with Premier Mode and then 10 other modes missing. Frankly, I had stopped playing competitive quite a while ago, and it was only a couple of months before CS2 had released that I actually had gotten back into Global Offensive again, and I had kind of played a little bit of competitive. I know they changed it so they had the actual competitive mode, and then they had it so you could just choose specific maps to play on. But with Counter-Strike Global Offensive, I didn't really play a whole lot of competitive. I mostly just played Arms Race and some of those fun game modes, and I actually had a really enjoyable time. Arms Race is one of my most favorite modes in Counter-Strike, and all of those fun little side modes I actually did really enjoy playing casually. Not as much Danger Zone because I'm just not really a fan of Battle Royales, but I kind of do want to play Danger Zone now that it's gone. I've only played it a couple of times, but it was one of the more fun Battle Royale modes that I played out of any Battle Royale game, to be honest. And the fact that Counter-Strike 2 launched with all of those modes is upsetting, and I'm not saying that's a knock on it, that it should knock the game down a couple of pegs. It's just the fact that you released a game with those modes we currently had and maps missing. On top of that, the game released without Workshop, obviously that was to be expected. But on top of all of that, the game was arguably worse off on release than Counter-Strike Global Offensive already was. And on top of that, Counter-Strike 2 had fully replaced Global Offensive from the Workshop, which I think is the huge problem. It's the fact of everything combined. You completely replaced the previous game, obviously to an extent. Obviously you can still play Global Offensive, but when you look up Global Offensive, you can't. If I'm a new person who just wants to play whatever Counter-Strike game is the newest and I go to Steam, you actually can't search Global Offensive. You have to go out of your way to play it. It's literally the one thing, like, they don't want you to play it. Valve wants the new Counter-Strike to be CS2, not Global Offensive. And I understand that. On top of the problems with the game and the fact that it's missing game modes, that is a huge hit to the game. Like, if they had released the game with the previous game modes they had, like Arms Race and all of that stuff, but the hit reg was still rough and whatnot, then it wouldn't be that bad because, hey, at least, we had all of the content we had previously. Yeah, the game's in a slightly worse state or there were some problems with it, but hey, or at least we're not missing half of the content. Oh wait, in reality, we are missing half the content that Global Offensive had. And on top of that, the game isn't in as good as a state as we wish it was. Oh no. So now you have a bare bones game with problems compared to a full game with a bunch of game modes that you can play casually, or at least fun game modes, including Danger Zone and all of that, with a few problems. The problem is when you have a bunch of small problems, like Counter-Strike 2 has, they all add up into one big problem, whereas if you have one small problem, then it's just one small problem. Whether that, obviously you might consider hit reg and problems with animations being a bit bigger than a small problem. If we had all of the content we did on Global Offensive, then I feel like it wouldn't be as big as a problem. Obviously, I have to bring TF2 into this because TF2, is it kind of been in the same circumstance that Counter-Strike 2 is in, although Counter-Strike 2 is a new game, TF2 is old. TF2 hasn't been updated or, checked on in forever. Valve also came out with that tweet saying that they were gonna, oh, we hear you TF2 community, and they have proceeded to do nothing. They've delivered none of their promises, and they didn't even make any promises to us. They just made that tweet and nothing has come for it. The game is still in the same state as it was when they made the tweet, maybe slightly less bots, but the bots are still a problem. That leads me to now, whereas we see them make that tweet, they didn't, provide on that tweet that they made for TF2, which obviously TF2 has always been in the shadows. It's normal. It comes to light that Valve really doesn't care in general about their games with the release of CS2 and how CS2 currently stands. In its current stance, CS2 is in a rough spot right now, and until we get an operation or some more content for the game, it still is in a pretty rough spot. I think it's at a pretty low player count for Counter-Strike. A lot of players have left, over 200k. The average player count currently, concurrent player count, is 700-ish thousand, which is a lot of players, but considering that it had peaked at like over 1 million on CS2's launch, yeah, you just dropped 200k players in a couple of months. You're gonna have to look into that, because that's a huge problem. Obviously, people are gonna leave the game, whatnot. They have lives and stuff, but still, it's still a big thing. On top of that, we haven't really heard any news from Valve themselves, on top of their anti-cheat being a problem with Counter-Strike. And I know a bunch of people, or a lot of people, are on the side of a less intrusive anti-cheat, but I'm going to be completely honest with you. A slightly more intrusive, I'm not saying the anti-cheat has to be kernel level, but Valve really needs to do something with their anti-cheat. And again, I know people are going to be like, I only play, Valve games because they have a less intrusive anti-cheat. And to that, I feel like people who say that, half of those people probably play games that have an intrusive anti-cheat like Battlefield and stuff, or even Valorant, and don't even realize that the game they're playing has a more intrusive anti-cheat. Or they're just saying that because they cheat themselves and would rather, be able to get away without getting banned longer. Obviously, that's a small percentage, I would assume, but that's still a problem. Personally, I don't really care about a kernel level anti-cheat to an extent. Obviously, Valorant does have some problems with their anti-cheat kind of acting like a virus in some ways. And again, there are massive or I don't want to say massive, but there are problems that a kernel level anti-cheat have over a surface level one like VAC, whereas a kernel level might ban you over simply changing some files that have nothing to do with the game, or having a specific program open that isn't even a cheat, or doesn't even interact with the game itself, that it just might mark you as wrong. Or you might download something for a completely different game and not even a cheat, you might just change the files or whatever, and it might flag that or delete certain files. You never know. But again, I'm not saying that Valve needs to make VAC a kernel level anti-cheat or anything. I just think they should make it a bit more than simply surface level. And I've seen some talks about AI, Valve is adding AI, and frankly, I can't see that happening anytime soon. Mostly because the huge problem with AI is, well, it isn't perfect. With AI pictures and stuff and how AI works, it's pretty good. I guarantee you that we would see way more false bans now than we ever have before with the surface level anti-cheat. Would it ban more cheaters? Most likely, but I feel like we would see a lot more innocent people getting banned from the AI anti-cheat. Hell, we saw people getting banned simply by turning up their sensitivity and just spinning in circles a bunch. That's a pretty big problem that we have, and I feel like if they were working on an AI anti-cheat, we wouldn't see that for at least another year to 2 years, because it just really isn't in a state that's good enough yet. I know some game companies do use AI anti-cheats, and it can help to an extent, but again, that takes lots and lots of footage. It's still, speculation, or not speculation, but it's never a full 100% perfect case. Again, you could make arguments for it, but I feel like, knowing Valve and how Gabe Newell works with his mindset, I feel like he would want to make sure that it's as perfect as possible, to where he doesn't have to worry about that many, if any, false bans being handed out. Again, with how it currently stands, especially since we haven't heard any new sources on them releasing any new games. I know Counter-Strike 2 is technically a new game, and I heard that Neon Prime or whatever is kind of in the work. Again, I don't really know what Valve plans on doing. They don't really talk to people, which I understand that's on purpose. If you don't say anything, there's no expectations to live up to, and there's no, expectations to fail. But they kind of failed us with the release of Counter-Strike 2, and we didn't really have expectations to begin with. They had just released a bunch of trailers, and then the game dropped a week later, and it's still kind of let us down. Yeah, I know Valve is like, oh, we purposefully don't say anything to the community so there's no expectations to ruin or whatever. But the problem is that when you don't say anything and our expectations are still ruined with Counter-Strike 2. Expectations were ruined with Counter-Strike 2, and you barely said anything about the game to begin with. I feel like it's maybe time to change your outlook on that statement and maybe actually at least talk about your games to an extent. You don't have to come out and be like, this is going to be the greatest thing since, you know, sliced bread, but I don't think there's anything wrong with coming out and saying, hey, we have plans in the future for a TF2 update or a Counter-Strike update, or we are working on making content for this or that. Again, you don't have to give a roadmap, because I know with how certain devs work and whatnot, there's no reason to say we're going to release this in a month and then a month from now it's not ready. I think we saw that with Counter-Strike 2, where it didn't really feel like it was ready to release when it did. And again, there's nothing wrong with not saying a release date, but some kind of just say something, you know, like you have to say something to us. The most we've ever gotten from Valve is that tweet they made about TF2, and look where that's gotten us. It's been over a year since then, maybe even longer, and we've seen absolutely nothing come from that. So they have, I think it's gotten to a point where you do have to talk to your audience a little, especially with how large of a company Steam is nowadays. I think there is some validity to actually just saying something about anything. I mean, hell, at least apologizing for the rough state of certain stuff to an extent. Like, again, you don't have to come out and say that you're doing this and that. And you don't have to come out and be super direct with stuff, and you don't have to say it's going to be done by this date. We don't need specific dates and stuff. We get that. You want to have as much time as you need to perfect something, but there's nothing wrong with coming out and just speaking, hey, there's plans on, you know, we're looking into Counter-Strike 2 more. Don't worry, at least tell us that you're actually doing something instead of sitting there on your ass raking in money from fucking cases and doing nothing with your time. Anyway, that's all I wanted to talk about. I'll see you in the next one.